My fiancée is threatening to end the wedding if I don't let her parents move in with us. After my grandfather's death 6 months ago, I inherited 90% of his wealth with a no-contest will, granting me not only enough money to never work again, but also a massive estate he claimed was his hunting cabin. It's big enough to fit my fiancée, my parents, and her parents comfortably. However, I said I didn't want them moving in with us, and now it's turned into a total blowout. To those who will ask, no common law doesn't apply to us, and after a heated debate she agreed to sign a prenup if I agreed to buy her a niece ring, and a vacation once a year. She clearly isn't with me for the money. Obviously, this comes off as a rich people problem, but up until 5 months ago I was still living in a one-bedroom apartment working at a rather large supermarket retail store making $12 an hour, and going to be paying off college debt until I was in my 60s. My fiancée is still working her nursing job, and we've been fully living together for 4 years. Some background into our relationship: we met 6 years ago. There were literally zero issues with us dating. When it came to some sort of conflict we sat down, explained both of our sides like adults, and generally fixed the problem. We've rarely gotten into arguments, and have the same end goals in life: children, grow old together, die, be buried next to each other, and have fun whenever we can. I've always had an incredibly distant relationship with her parents. When she introduced me to them, they both stated they didn't like me to my face and thought I wasn't good enough. Her father even said, "Not in my lifetime." When I asked for his permission to marry his daughter, which I stated the only reason I was doing it was for an olive branch. My parents on the other hand love my fiancée. They scooped her up like she was one of us from the start. Has never said anything bad about her in public, nor have they in private. She, at least, in my parents' eyes, is the metaphorical second coming of Christ. During my grandfather's decline in health, I was the first one there. He just got old, and with being old comes complications. I stopped working my higher paying job to work retail to have more time to take care of him, because his other children were busy. This was a very stressful time in our relationship. I had just recently left my job, was not around often, and I myself was super stressed. Recently, I began the slow move of everything over there. While we still have to live in our apartment until the lease agreement is up, there's nothing against the rules of me moving stuff. I brought it up to my girlfriend how taking care of my grandfather has really made me realize how important my family is, and that I wanted to know if it was okay for my parents to move into the new house with us. My dad could retire, and my mom can spend the rest of her life relaxing, not stressing over bills and debt. Because I can pay that off over time. I'm not insane enough to pay it all in one go. She expressed how that was an amazing idea, and how she'd like her parents to move in as well. I laughed at the idea, and asked her if she was serious, and why would I want to live in a house with people I don't like, nor want to interact with. She explained that this could be a good chance at us healing old wounds and making amends. I explained that not only do I not want to heal old wounds, if it was up to me, they wouldn't be coming to the wedding. Obviously this was the wrong thing to say, and now she's giving the ultimatum of let them move in, or the wedding is off. While I can understand her side, I seriously do not want to interact with them in any capacity. They've tried numerous times to get her back with exes, lie about me, even spread a rumor about me being unfaithful, until I pulled up real evidence of me being nowhere near where they said I was thanks to Google location. My fiancé knows all of this, and still wants to try and rebuild a relationship with them. This past week, I've been avoiding her with excuses and white lies. I've been meeting with accountants, lawyers, wedding venue people, and jewelers. I've also been spending all-nighters at my grandfather's grave drinking with him, and not getting back home until 4 a.m. To me, it feels like my grandfather is still the only person I can vent my deepest secrets, and frustrations to. I've postponed the wedding. While some of you may refer to it as calling her bluff, I call it waiting and seeing. As of right now, we're really talking about how compatible we truly are, going over our goals in life again, and talking in depth about the relationship we want with our in-laws if we got married. Apparently a lot had changed since the last time we talked about it. She genuinely thought moving her parents in would make my relationship with them better over time. I've expressed that as a result of all they've said/done to me, any positive relationship or communication with them will only be done out of necessity. For example, if she was pregnant, in the hospital, or any life-altering complication or celebration. She did not take this well, but that was expected, but it's important I tell my truth. She believes I'll come around, and try to build a relationship with her parents, but as of right now I can't see myself doing it. My parents won't be moving in, as I haven't even asked them yet. I know some of you were confused/assumed it was already happening. It was not. I asked if it was okay if they could. Not telling her it was happening. Some of you suggested that maybe moving them in as newlyweds was weird, and suggested building them a small house on property. I didn't think about that, and will talk to my accountant/parents about it whenever that conversation needs to be talked about. Nice idea, Reddit strangers. What have I been doing? A lot of meetings about my future, finances, and setting up trusts/wills. I'll be re-enrolling into school to take classes on business, finances, accounting, and economics as my accountant suggested I do. We're still working on a budget, but as of right now my next steps are furthering my education to manage my newfound wealth and opportunity in a healthy way as to not blow it. As of right now, to be honest, I'm emotionally drained. I think the weight of my grandfather's death is finally hitting me despite it being months later, and the only thing that kept me going was the idea of the wedding day. With that being postponed, I can really only focus on myself, my values, and my emotions. Staying up all night and drinking at a gravesite isn't healthy, and I've not only promised myself to cut back on the booze, but also not stay up drinking. I've been thinking about maybe getting into some sort of therapy or grief counseling, but I'd need to make sure that is in the budget with my accountant, as that's a long-term thing. Maybe they know someone. I know a lot say to drop the relationship, but I think after 6 years it's worth giving it a try to save it. Making a choice like that without trying to fix the problem seems silly, but I did expect a lot of those answers to come through. It's just how Reddit is. Just know that, I know my worth, I know my values, and I'm not backing down. Maybe we won't work things out, and the relationship will just end. Maybe things will work out, and we can continue. At least for now. 48 hours later, it's too soon to tell. As for the prenup, we haven't signed anything yet. A lot of you are really harping on the niece ring, and fancy vacations once a year thing. While the vacations compromise is indeed concerning, the ring issue is something we've been having conflict on for a while. My personal opinion before/now is that rings are overpriced, silly, and serve no significant purpose in a relationship. She says that they're an important symbol of love/commitment. The compromise to the prenup in regards to the ring was, I actually buy her a better ring than I already had. Which sounds super predatory in those words, but it makes sense in my mind. She doesn't want a Titanic heart of the ocean style jewelry piece, just something a bit more noticeable. I probably should have elaborated on that in my original post, but hey, we all make mistakes. Which to some sounds like gold digger mentality, but I know the price range of ring she wants and it's about the same range my dad spent on my mom's ring. It's something you'd see on a middle-class woman's finger, nothing huge, nothing small, just enough I guess. I still think they're just silly circles of metal and compressed dirt. There's not much to say. We sat down, talked for a while. I explained my side of things, she explained hers. She was upset I was postponing the wedding, but once she realized I wasn't going to fold, she agreed under the notion that it was best for our relationship to work on this before marriage. Right now, I'm taking a step back from her to clear the air, and give us time to formulate what we want on our own. I've driven the 2 hours to the cabin. Thankfully the internet people hooked that up yesterday. I've talked to my parents, not about them like moving in, but about the situation as a whole. Leaving out, I went to the internet before I went to them. While my dad can't just abandon his job, he sends his love and support. My mom is currently making the 18-hour drive, so I wouldn't be alone by myself. I've gotten attempted phone calls from the in-laws within the last 24 hours, but I've watched them ring and went back to doing my everyday tasks like lawn work, meal prep, reading, binge watching Netflix. It's strange, but right now I feel happier alone right now than I do with fiancé. Maybe it's some sign that it's not meant to be, or that I've finally been able to relax for the first time in years and have found comfort in solitude. Maybe I'm happy my mom is going to cook me my favorite dinner as a child. To cheer me up. I think as of right now though, I have a lot of work to do, not only emotionally but also literally. I'm thinking about doing some telework just to still have a mainstream of income part-time, as I'll probably get bored of being jobless in about a week. I need some hobbies. Your parents disrespected me? I'm leaving. So, I am 26 female, black, and my boyfriend 32 male, white, have been dating for about 5 months now, and he is honestly the best thing that ever happened to me. He is the first guy who's ever made me consider marriage and starting a family. I did love him. Now to the story. Last weekend was his mom's 60th birthday and my boyfriend was going to go to the birthday party. He thought it would be a nice occasion for him to introduce me to his family, so he asked me to join him. We let his family know that he was bringing me and they were okay with it. His parents' place is 3 hours away from the city we live in, so we decided that we were going to spend the night. So, we arrived at his parents' place and his mom, dad, brother and sister were there. They hugged me while greeting me and I honestly thought they were genuinely happy to meet me. It didn't feel like anything was off. They all seemed like nice people. So we spent the evening talking, and there was a lot of laughter and everything was going great. At around 8 p.m., my boyfriend and his brother leave for the airport to pick up a relative of theirs who was flying in for the party. So, I'm left at the house with his mom, dad and sister. I didn't feel unsafe or anything. They had been nice to me the whole time. I had left my phone charging in the room we were going to sleep in, so I excused myself to go check if I had any important messages or calls. There weren't any, so it didn't take long. I start heading back to the living room and as I'm walking back, I hear them talking. Then his mom asks, "So, what do you think about her?" I immediately knew they were talking about me and I honestly wanted to know what my potential in-laws thought about me, so I stopped and listened. His dad says, "She's nice." His sister agrees with him and adds, "She's pretty too." Then his mom says something that immediately made me sick to my stomach. She says, "Yeah, if only she wasn't a foo king N-word." And they all agreed with her. My heart dropped. I tiptoed back to the room and I sat there so confused. I was shaking so much I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call my boyfriend, but I had a weird feeling, so I didn't. I felt so alone and unsafe. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone around me, not even my boyfriend. I live in Canada and people here are not as open with their racism as in other places. Which in my opinion, is much more scary. Now at that moment, the only people I could think of asking for help were my sisters. One of my sisters lives in the US and the other one is in Canada but in a different province. They both live far away, so there is nothing they could have done to help me at that moment, but I felt like they are the only people I could trust. We have a WhatsApp group chat, so I sent them a message telling them what happened. I have lived in Canada for a couple of years, but it's not easy to make trustworthy friends here. Canada is a lonely place. I have met a lot of people, but I don't feel like any of them are my friends. If you are an immigrant in Canada, you probably understand what I mean. Anyway, back to the story. So my sisters were like, "You need to find a way to get out of there immediately." They tell me to make up an excuse saying I had an emergency and needed to leave. I stayed in the room for some time scared to death. It took everything in me not to start crying. After I had collected my thoughts and calmed down, I did what my sisters told me to do. I hadn't unpacked my bag yet and luckily, we brought my car cause it's fuel efficient compared to my boyfriend's. I took my bag and car keys and passed the living room in a rush saying something came up and I had to leave. I didn't give them a chance to ask any questions. I just got in my car and drove away. It was getting late and I wasn't in the right state of mind to drive back home. I just wanted to get as far away as possible before stopping at a hotel for the night. My boyfriend had called me a couple of times. I called him back but I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened, so I gave him the same excuse I gave his parents. He asked if he should come home as well and I told him it wasn't necessary. I went home the next day and my boyfriend showed up at my apartment a few hours later. I looked at him and it felt like all the love I had for him had just disappeared. Though I acted like everything was fine, I wondered if he was racist too. He had been so great during our whole relationship. I never once felt like he had any racist thoughts or feelings. But I can't help but think about how his family made me believe they were nice people, and I keep wondering if he's also just pretending to like me. We don't live together but my lease is ending in July. He owns his place, so I was supposed to move in with him after my lease ended, but I have managed to get out of moving in with him. I don't feel like I love him anymore. It's been 3 days now since we got back from his parents' place and I want to end things with him without it causing any trouble, but I'm glad I thought to run away. So this happened a while back. I was probably around 10 to 11 years old, meaning my brother, Alex, was around 8 to 9 years old. We were walking home from the bus, which takes about 7 minutes to do, when I noticed something was off. I didn't see anything at first, but I just knew that something was wrong. So my brother and I start walking home. As the only two who got off at our stop were him and I, this blue and silver beat-up truck drives past us, and I think nothing of it. It never slowed down or stopped. It just kept going. Alex and I were holding hands, as my grandmother always told me to do with him, as he's my baby brother and I want nothing to happen to him. Nothing happens at first, but then the same truck drives around again, driving our way this time. There was a cul-de-sac at the end of our road. It was driving slower this time and went up the road and turned, out of sight. Now Alex and I were nearing the three-way intersection that connected the cul-de-sac road to the other side road. Right off the main road the man just drove down. I happened to look down the street and see the truck driving, real slow, down the street towards us again. I knew we had to run. I knew there was no other option. I knew that if we didn't, my brother and I would not be safe. I don't know how I knew, but I did. As soon as we passed a house that blocked us from view, I turned to Alex and spoke to him exactly 4 words. No questions, just run, and we did. In our driveway, which is about 100 feet long by the way, there is a row of bushes and pine trees that divide our home from the next door neighbor. I dragged him in there and told him to be quiet and I'd explain later. I watched as the same truck drove down and around the cul-de-sac again before coming to a stop right in front of our house. I had to hold my brother's mouth shut because he was crying and I was scared that whoever was following us would hear him and hurt us. I was more worried for him than for myself at this point. I was in fight or flight mode. I was the big sister. I had to protect him. I looked at him and said that the truck was following us, and I told him to not be scared. I said I wouldn't let anyone hurt him, and it seemed to calm him down a little. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the door to the truck opened and out came a man. He was tall, skinny and messy. Short hair covered by a torn baseball cap. Ripped jean shorts and a puke green tank top. He entered our yard and looked around a bit. Alex and I were still in the bushes and I was trying to find a way to get to our house safely without getting this dude's attention. The guy left after what felt like forever and entered his car. He started it and drove away slowly. I waited a few minutes to make sure he was gone before turning to my brother and saying, "We need to run. When I count to 3. We are going to run behind the house to the back door. Okay?" He agreed and we waited a few more seconds before I started counting. I still didn't have a good feeling about this, but I knew we had to move. I started counting. As soon as I hit 3, we booked it across our driveway and into our front yard to go around the house. As soon as we left our spot I heard it. The sound of accelerating. He saw us. He was waiting for us to leave. He chased us up our driveway, as we ran around the side. I grabbed Alex's hand and practically dragged him around the house and made him run ahead to the garage door to see if it was locked while I searched for my house key. About 20 feet from me, the garage door was open. I swear to God I saw this man round the opposite corner of the house that we did as I entered the house. We entered and I slammed it shut, locking it and deadbolting it. I didn't stop running until I opened the house door and ran downstairs with Alex, screaming our safe word. My grandmother made a safe word for us that was a normal everyday word that we could use if we were in danger. Just had to scream it. Basically it woke my aunt who worked the night shift and was sleeping. We told her everything and she stayed up with us until my grandmother got home. We called the police and that was my first ever interaction with an officer. The man was never caught. To this day I don't know what he wanted, but I'm sure it wasn't good. I'm just glad my grandma drilled stranger danger into my head. I don't know where my brother or I would be right now, if she hadn't. So, to the messy man in the blue and silver truck. Let's not meet again. I dropped my friends for spilling my husband's biggest secret. I told him this on the 4th of July. After the fireworks mostly ended and we were heading back, I asked him in the car, wouldn't it have been weird if we met each other before the first time we actually met? But we just didn't think of each other as significant at the time? He smiled and turned to me saying, "PFFT, that's impossible. There's no universe where we would have met and I would not think of you as significant." That statement struck me in the heart, because I knew I would soon prove that sentence very wrong, but I continued on with my plan anyway. What if I told you we have met each other before? Before that time I was introduced as E's little brother's friend? He looked at me like I was crazy, so that's when I pulled over on the side of the road and pulled out my phone to show him the post I put up here before, that explained everything. He took about 8 minutes to read the whole thing, and when he finished he put the phone down and stared straight ahead, almost like he was dumbfounded, scared, and confused all at the same time. I started throwing out every excuse and apology I could muster at the moment for about 15 minutes straight when he decided to tell me to stop, and I did. Then he just sat there and sobbed uncontrollably for about 10 minutes before he finally asked me how much of our relationship, and how much of my identity, was fabricated according to his liking. I told him the honest truth: none of my personality or identity was fabricated for him, except for the fact of how we met. The only thing I ever changed about myself to make him like me more was lying about liking Chinese food. I hate Chinese food. But other than that, everything else was real. Although my friendship with his younger brother was built upon ill intentions, my friendship between his brother and I are now one of the most genuine friendships I have now. He just cried and told me that he does not want to divorce at all, but he does want us to have some time apart so that he could absorb the truth that I gave him. He also said that he expects me to tell his brother and mom this Friday because they deserve to know the truth just as much as he did. I told him okay, and we drove the rest of the ride home in silence. When we got home, he hugged me and cried for about 5 minutes before he got out the car, packed his stuff, and said that he will be staying at a nearby hotel for now. He said that he knows that he still loves me, but does not yet know how to react to the fact that the beginning of our relationship was very, very orchestrated. To sum it all up, I guess telling him was a success? I honestly don't know. He sent me a good night and I love you text last night while he was at the hotel, so I guess he's no as much mad as he may be betrayed? Update 2. Woke up this morning to find out that hubby not only lied about going to a hotel to stay at, but also lied about not wanting a divorce, through a text message. He went to his family's home, not a Foofking hotel. Told them the entire story himself, probably exaggerated it too to make me seem crazy. His whole family wants nothing to do with me too, claims I'm psycho. He said that he lied about going to a hotel, because he knew if he told the truth I would try to stop him? Honestly, I feel so betrayed. I tried to be a good wife by showing him the true me, and this is what he does? I did all this work just for it to end up like this? Honestly, I kind of deserve it. I didn't even tell him in the first place because I felt bad. I told him because I had a suspicion that he was catching on to the fact that I knew him for 2.5 years before he knew me, largely because I found out he was keeping my old phone in his work desk. My old phone that has screenshots of a lot of his old Instagram posts, plans in my notes app about him, etc. So I guess he never truly loved me if he can't even get past an honest confession like this one. I might update this in a few years when I find a new husband. Lol. He cost me my wife, so I ruined his lover over and over again. Either 10, 20, or 30 years ago, I married my high school sweetheart, Betty. I had just graduated high school, and she was staying in high school, pregnant with our first child Frankie at age 18 to 19. Throughout her pregnancy and our dating, I was informed of Betty's condition of epilepsy. She had infrequent seizures, and I have seen her have a grand mal seizure twice before the incident, once while eating, and once on a family hike. The light flickering through the trees triggered it, we think. So later down the road we have our second child, living on our own in a trailer park in Bloxnard. My wife has always been a little bit punk, dyeing her hair many times over and over, and now having to shave her head as a result of her extremely damaged hair. She dyed what was left of her hair pink. She was a belly dancer, had a style of her own, and really had a don't F with me vibe she gave off to anybody but me and our 2 boys, Frankie and Sam. These aren't just nostalgic details, they are important to the slowly increasing plot. That being said, one afternoon while Betty is getting ready to drop the boys off at Grandma's to hit the mall, she had another seizure, a bad one. It's hard to be too descriptive without choking up right now, but she knew it was coming the second before. She hits the ground. I do my part to put her on her side and sweep the mouth. I know this is frowned upon now for some reason, but it's what her parents trained me to do. I call an ambulance, telling them help, my wife is having a grand mal seizure, a bad one. Whilst trying to instruct my frightened 3-year-old to go to mommy's bedroom, Sammy was hardcore napping at 11 months, literally inches away. The ambulance shows up and takes her. I stay back because Grandma isn't there yet for the kids. I called to make sure she'd be there soon, otherwise I'd have to drag the kids with me to the local hospital. Grandma gets there and I drive to the hospital as fast as possible. I get there pretty quick and talk to the doctor within a few minutes. The ER physician, we'll call Dr. Thoreau, steeped in irony, whose mercy I was at, told me that we're going to put her under to do a CAT scan/MRI/something having nothing to do with her epilepsy. In my naivete, not understanding that I can tell him what I want him to do, I just said okay. I did tell him, however, that she had a seizure, has had seizures in the past, etc. He didn't believe that the seizure was epileptic in nature. He asked me about substances she's taken, drinks, etc. I told him no, she doesn't do that, but she did have a drink a couple of nights ago. He was super convinced, based on her appearance I presume, that this was substances, and that she just needed to get it out of her system. Toxicology comes back. No substances in system. Dr. Thoreau says this doesn't test for all substances out there. Wow, doc. So she's put under now, kept in that state, in the meanwhile no EEG machine, which measures brainwaves, to determine that, yeah, she's having a seizure. SS, give her some phenobarb or whatever. I didn't know the importance of all this at the time, so we're just waiting for this test and that test and for her to come out of the under-ness or whatever. This takes a day and a half. They finally allow/acquire an EEG machine, with an EEG tech, and come to find out I was right, that all along, she was having seizures. The entire time. Now she is brain dead. Now I'm signing DNRs and hospice and neurologists are asking me about Buddhism and if I've tried it. Nice try. So she died days later. Then something called 9/11 happened, which not only was 5 days after what would have been my wife's 23rd birthday, but exactly my 25th. Let's just say it was a rough year. My father-in-law tries to go to one of those law tigers with the case, but they say it needs to come from the husband. At first I don't want to go through this process, despite knowing that. This mofo's arrogance caused my wife's demise. I eventually lawyer up, get referred to a great attorney on contingency, and begin the lawsuit process. Revenge is starting. ED techs, hospitals, various entities involved in Betty's care, all separately settled out of court for unspecified amounts, well specified to me obviously. This is just the beginning of the revenge. Of all the entities that bowed out of the fight and handed over a check, this arrogant doc wasn't having it. He wanted a trial. He really wanted me to have to relive the pain I'd been going through the past couple years just protect his/her name. We take it to court. Revenge by jury. 7-2 in favor of the plaintiff. Dr. Thoreau fell below the standard of care. Judgment for $10 million. Goodbye money. Civil suit done. Enter fallout in the medical community. Ultimate revenge is that the doctor had his license suspended for a time, and didn't practice medicine for a long time. Then he tried his/her hand at different types of professions. Unemployable in the medical field. To this day. Dude's broker than I ever was. I raised the rent of a mother with 6 kids because they asked me to be more professional. I am a small-time landlord, with just 4 tenants. Earlier this year, I had 2 sisters that didn't respond to my request to add the gal's husband to the lease, though he was living with them. Not a big deal. But did I mention the pit bull they also brought home, without permission? I do allow pets, and had previously approved their other dog. I asked nicely in person and by email in the months leading up to the malicious compliance. They also did not respond when I asked if they were happy there, and wanted to renew their lease for the following year. I asked again. Then I emailed them notice that I would start showing the unit 2 days later. I try to be a nice landlord. I do. They had a newborn, as well, so I scheduled all of the showings within a 2-hour window on the same night so I could be in their space as little as possible. Also, because they had not responded, and it was now serious crunch time for getting another tenant and my spouse worked all the following 2 weeks during evening showing hours, I had the delightful inconvenience of bringing my 2- and 6-year-old children with me to the showings. Because I'm not a corporation, I'm a small-time family landlord with kids. Try to imagine how difficult it is to conduct business meetings with 2 kids, right? Then imagine staggering showings every 15 minutes, with prospective tenants who are also bringing their own kids. Just to further clutter your imagination, this is an 800 square foot 2-bedroom apartment with a cozy entryway. So I arrive with my 2 kids, to find that my tenants are still at home, along with the husband, the newborn and the other sister's boyfriend. So that's 7 people in a small kitchen already. Then the first prospective tenants start arriving. Husbands, wives, with kids, and some showing up early so there's 2 sets of them. That's 14 people in a small kitchen. And I'm a mom. I have magical powers. So I'm holding my toddler, my daughter is safely under the dining table coloring, and I'm chatting with the prospective tenants and directing traffic while my actual tenants prepare to depart. If you didn't know this already, it's common practice in the US to leave the premises during real estate or apartment showings. This was their first apartment, so I actually emailed them ahead of time to let them know what is generally expected at showings, for example a relatively tidy apartment, and that they can leave, for their own convenience. They do eventually leave, after the boyfriend tells a prospective tenant that he, in fact, also lives there. And I carry on with an exhausting scheduling of showings. And have my new tenants all picked out and lease signed by the next day. Awesome, right? The next night, I get a voicemail from the husband, who is not my tenant. I saved it, and just listened to it again, because it still gives me that same delightful shiver of malicious compliance. In his voicemail, he told me how awful it was that my children touched his infant's things. They didn't, because I keep my kids entertained with magical mommy toys, but prospective tenants also brought children, and how they had to sterilize everything to keep their infant from being sick, and how inconvenient it was to have showings with only 2 days notice, and how very unprofessional I was to bring my children, and asked if I could just be more professional in the future. You can hear it, can't you? The deep shiver of malicious compliance vibrating through my offended being. The next morning, I started issuing professional lease violation notices. 1 for the extra residents of the unit, hubby and boyfriend. 1 for the extra dog. And a few additional ones for building concerns I noted during the showings. They ignored the violation notice, which I sent by certified mail and, thoughtfully, also by email. I decided to be even more professional 30 days later, and issue a 5-day notice to vacate. And I called their mom, who is their emergency contact, as an eviction notice is an emergency. Did I mention that their lease was due to end just a few weeks later? But it would be unprofessional of me to let these violations slide until then. 3 days later, they'd magically sent me all the information I'd requested, removed the other dog, licensed the first dog, gotten the required pet insurance. They moved out on their lease termination date. And skipped out on their last electric bill, and left the unit in damaged condition. Despite my professional security deposit disposition statement and request for payment, they ignored those notices, until I stated I would proceed to small claims court by X date for the total due beyond their security deposit. On said date, they replied stating they didn't think it was fair that they should have to cover damages to the unit, or pay any more money toward their utility bill. Yep. 2 months later, there we were in the lobby of the courthouse, sitting across from each other on uncomfortable waiting room benches. They're laughing among themselves about how they're going to get their full security deposit back. And I'm quietly reviewing my presentation notes to the judge and my sizable stack of evidence, photographs, videos. This was my first time in court, but I wasn't laughing. I was preparing. 1 hour later, we're back in the lobby and their mom is trying to write me a check for the full amount of the judgment. She doesn't have a pen. Her kids don't have a pen. I, however, have a pen. I cheerfully offer my pen. She writes the check and hands it to me, and... Wait. I hold out my hand again. Got my pen back too. I escaped modern slavery but risked it all to go back home. It started when a man came knocking at my mother's door. He told her parents that he'll put her to work all for a small price. Without my grandmother getting a say, my grandfather sold her. My mother was no longer a burden and was enslaved at a young age to provide for her family. She was sold for a couple dollars, trafficked, and has been a slave all her life. I was born into her world and it was only until years later that I was saved from hell. My job was to work on Lake Ulta, the largest man-made lake, scuba diving every day in the dirtiest of waters, working on ships, and serving under an overseer. Whenever I failed at any of these tasks, I was beaten and denied food. I watched my mother receive senseless beatings after slaving away every single day, working for scraps. I slept every night paralyzed in fear without shelter. I laid on dry grass, paranoid wondering if I was going to be eaten by the lurking wild animals. Watching the punishments and sacrifices my mother made pushed me to keep working hard because it meant we were providing. What I didn't know at the time was that I had been conditioned to think that the child labor I did was normal, necessary even, and the cruel treatments I got was all there was to life. It was only until I saw other kids much younger than I being treated terribly that I learned there was no escape from this life. There were senseless beatings, many of my friends were malnourished, and worst of all, many of them never got to grow old with me. I watched them pass over with my very own eyes. As I watched the other kids around me draw their last breaths, I constantly wondered when it would be my turn. How many more beatings would I have to take? Every day was a constant battle of trying not to sink and drown in muddy water. When I was 10 years old, the entire course of my life changed. My mother, in search for a better future for her and I, gave me away. I was taken in by the Rescue Foundation Many Hopes. I was taken to their recovery center and for the first time in my entire life I was given food, water, and adequate sleep, without having to worry if it'd be taken away from me. I had clothes to put on my back and I couldn't understand the generosity of the people doing this for me. I never asked for anything and they continuously kept providing me with everything I'd ever need to actually live. They took me back to my actual hometown and I was finally allowed to live with my grandmother. I was granted the opportunity to a completely free education paid by Many Hopes. I was happy to learn but I had so much catching up to do. I didn't even know how to hold a pencil. I was a slave for all my life and this was my first time learning anything that wasn't ships. I regularly thought about the other kids at the lake and how many of them wouldn't have a home to go to even if freed. I thought about other people like my mother, who lost their childhood and worked all their life. Many Hopes granted me a way out, but my only job now was to work harder than everyone else in my class. I needed to do it for my mother who slaved her life away, helping me get set up, and for my grandmother who took me in. All of my continuous hard work paid off and I was awarded the highest honors of admission to university, all semesters and supplies paid for by Many Hopes. It didn't mean my struggle stopped there. Working in school through all the traumas Lake Ulta gave me was one of the biggest challenges I faced. I had many sleepless nights and this affected me in school at times. Physically I was free, but my mind wanted to take me back to the lake. I tried to forget everything about the endless murky lake, all the kids that were beaten and starved. But I had to keep moving forward. I had to break the cycle in Ghana of desperation, and show that no human has a price. After graduating from university with a business degree I was granted an incredible job working for marketing campaigns. I flew on private planes for companies like Shell Oil and Tiffany's. I did everything everyone around me thought I would never do. I worked from literal rags to riches. However, there was a gap inside me that I still couldn't fill. Though I achieved freedom, the fact is there are still kids hauling ships, moving nets, being beaten every breathing moment. I couldn't leisurely work at my job knowing I still have brothers and sisters left behind that needed a chance to be saved. I made the bold decision to quit my career and went back to Ghana and worked at the Many Hopes and Challenging Heights Rescue Center, the same exact one that saved me. When I returned to my home village of Winneba, I was greeted by the children, hugged, and paraded by all of them. I knew I had the knowledge and expertise to show the kids in Ghana that they too can be like me. Right now I'm running investigations to locate kids that are trafficked, finding out where their home is, and freeing them out of slavery. The trauma, scars, mental illnesses, and stolen childhoods is almost unbearable to witness. I don't wish it upon anyone. Our Many Hopes facility receives donations till this day and every cent goes a long way to ending modern slavery. It's remarkable to think there are good people in the world that care about our cause and care about saving these kids. It's so easy to live in comfort and turn a blind eye to the rest of the world, like I almost did while I was in school. But I've seen change being made from those that pay attention. I myself am a prime example of the change made by people who care. People with expired NDAs, what's the information you can now tell us? I had an NDA at the daycare I worked at. When I started, I worked with this crazy woman, let's call her Brenda, in the infant room. Now, Brenda was probably in her 60s but dressed like a 20-year-old in the 80s. I remember a spirit day we did that she showed up in a snakeskin miniskirt and knee-high Converse stilettos. Brenda was terrible with children, forcing them to eat by shoving spoons of hot porridge in their mouths and holding their head. She would barely burp the kids, force me to change all of the kids, and never did any activities with them, even though that was the selling point of this daycare. I was left to do all the paperwork and enrichment. She also discussed being hurt in various ways with bottles in the parking lot by her boyfriend who she stalked. I went to management more than once to voice my concern about her. She was a danger to kids. They told me, and so quote, be mean to her until she leaves. You know the boss won't fire her. Apparently, the daycare manager would get a good bonus if she didn't have to fire anyone, so she refused to do it. All the staff were underpaid, overworked, and the staff higher up were really good friends with the parents of some of the most annoying kids in the daycare. You couldn't do anything with those kids, their parents let them run the daycare and wondered why no one could get anything done. I had one of the kids say something incredibly rude and yell at me and her mom. Then the assistant manager came in and blamed me for the actions of the kid, and apologized to her mom and assured her I will do better in teaching her kid. Excuse me? We were always told when parents were touring so we could put our best face on. When you tour a daycare, you are not seeing what the daycare is like. Teachers in other rooms were regularly yelling at kids, pulling arms, putting kids in timeouts, and not letting them eat with everyone if they acted up. Which is all incredibly not okay. If you tried to do everything the right way, it would take longer and you would get in trouble for not staying on schedule. I was invited to a pure romance party within my first week working there during class time. There was a designated crying and screaming room. One of the parents pulled their kid out of the daycare and left a well-earned 1-star review on Google, and the boss required every parent that worked at the daycare to leave a review. Even relatives who never set foot in the building were putting in reviews loaded with BS. So the grandmother of the kid wrote a review pointing that out as well. 2 1-star reviews don't stack up against 10 5-star reviews on Google, so no one really knows how bad it is.